CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello there, I'm Paul Barber. Our top stories this hour. Asia-Pacific leaders call for a free, open and fair trading environment as they wrap up this year's APEC meetings. An evacuation of staff and patients is underway at Gaza's biggest hospital as Israeli troops continue their hunt for Hamas fighters. Fury on the streets of Madrid. Tens of thousands turn out to oppose the coalition government's amnesty deal with Catalan separatists. And SpaceX launches the biggest and most powerful rocket ever built, but a loss of communications forces it to self-destruct. Asia-Pacific economies have once again called for more equal decision-making in global economic governance, including reform of the World Trade Organization. This year's APEC meetings concluded in San Francisco with the issuing of the Golden Gate Declaration. However, no unilateral position was reached on either Gaza or Ukraine. A statement said most countries strongly condemn the aggression against Ukraine, and a number of nations, including Brunei, Indonesia and Malaysia, separately called for a ceasefire in the Middle East. APEC was dominated by the first face-to-face meeting in a year between the presidents of China and the United States. President Xi Jinping also met with a number of other leaders and spoke about the importance of deepening Asia-Pacific cooperation, as well as driving regional and global growth. Lu Wei reports.
President Xi said APEC has stood at the global forefront of openness and development since its establishment. He said the world is now facing multiple risks and challenges, and leaders of the Asia-Pacific economies must consider how the region can play a better role in this process. President Xi made 4 proposals. He called on the APEC members to stay committed to innovation-driven development. President Xi said countries should work together to build an open, fair, equitable and non-discriminatory environment for scientific and technological progress. He said digital transformation should be accelerated to create new growing momentum for the Asia-Pacific region. President Xi also stressed the importance of staying committed to openness in development. He urged the APEC members to promote free and open trade and investment, and to support and strengthen the multilateral trading regime with the World Trade Organization at the center. He also spoke about the need to maintain the stability and openness of global industrial and supply chains. The Chinese president said it is necessary to stick to green and low-carbon development. Countries should accelerate this transition to build a clean and beautiful Asia-Pacific region. President Xi also called for promoting inclusive development that benefits all. He said it is imperative to fully implement the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and put development back to the priority of the international agenda. This year marks the 45th anniversary of China's reform and opening up. President Xi said China will continue to pursue high-quality development and openness, and Chinese modernization will bring the world more and greater opportunities.
That was Lu Wei reporting in Beijing. Well, this week's meeting between Presidents Xi and Biden has been welcomed by the head of the International Monetary Fund, who described it as timely and important.
It sends a signal to the rest of the world that we must find ways to cooperate on those challenges where no country on its own can succeed. And it is important at a time when geo-economic fragmentation has indeed deepened, with negative consequences for the prospects for accelerating growth. We see 2 very important outcomes of this meeting. The first one is just the signaling effect it has. And I heard it in the room, I heard it in the corridors. It is received very positively. And the second is discussing some of the most pressing issues, especially climate, given that we are now days away from the start of COP28, reinvigorating a sense of urgency to work together is certainly very timely and very important.
Well, after this news bulletin, my colleague Juliette Mann will be here with the agenda. In this week's show, just what might President Xi's meeting with President Biden mean for the rest of the world? That's the agenda, right after The World Today at 16:30 GMT here on CGTN. An evacuation of staff and patients is underway at Gaza's biggest hospital. Israeli troops who moved into the Al-Shifa in northern Gaza on Wednesday are continuing their search for Hamas militants who they say are using it as a command centre. Israel has also warned civilians to leave the southern city of Khan Yunis, where at least 32 Palestinians were killed overnight by airstrikes. Our correspondent Noor Harazin is in southern Gaza.
Well, this morning at around 9 a.m. the Israeli forces called the doctors and asked the doctors to evacuate the Al-Shifa hospital with the patients. However, the doctors refused. Then they were forced to evacuate the Al-Shifa hospital. We're talking about more than 5,000 people that evacuated the Al-Shifa hospital, including medical staff, displaced people who went to the Al-Shifa hospital to take shelter. They fled their homes and went there, and a number of patients and people who were injured in this Israeli war on Gaza. Here I am standing in the Salah ad-Din street. This street is where we're expecting the 5,000 people that evacuated the Al-Shifa hospital to come through walking. It is a 3 to 4 hours journey of walking, and the reason why the number is now little comparing to the previous week is because recently, over the past few days, the Israeli military set gates, security gates, in order to check one by one of those who try to flee to southern Gaza. We are right now expecting more people to come, the doctors from the Al-Shifa hospital and also the patients. According to some of the doctors, they said this morning that they had to leave behind some patients inside the Al-Shifa hospital, those who cannot move, cannot even get from their beds, adding to a number of premature babies.
And Noor, in southern Gaza, where many displaced people have fled, that's also come under fire again from Israeli forces.
Well, yes, actually I am in southern Gaza now. I am standing in Salah ad-Din street in southern Gaza, and on my right there is clashes and gunfire and Israeli airstrikes. On my left there is white phosphor bombs, smoke bombs, shelling, continuous shelling from the Israeli tanks on the eastern border. So yes, it is not as safe as the IDF described this place. However, Palestinians have nowhere to go but to follow the directions. Maybe they will save their lives. Over the night and also this early hours of the morning, there has been several Israeli airstrikes and attacks on northern Gaza and central Gaza and also in southern Gaza. Al-Fakhura school, which is located in Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza, we're getting reports about dozens, if not hundreds of people that were killed inside the school. This is a UN shelter, a school where there is hundreds of thousands of Palestinian families actually taking shelter there. Also, there were airstrikes on Hamad City in Khan Yunis in southern Gaza. A number of people were killed. More than 20 people actually were killed, including women and children. So yes, as we speak, actually, I can hear and see some of the Israeli shelling on the eastern side. Southern Gaza is not as safe, as I mentioned before. It is not as safe as northern Gaza. However, people have to do whatever they are facing. They have to evacuate, even though lately, yesterday and also today, the Israeli warplanes thrown leaflets on the people of southern Gaza, east southern Gaza, asking them to evacuate. So maybe we are looking to a new Israeli incursion, land invasion in southern Gaza.
Noor Harazin reporting. 15 seriously injured Palestinians have arrived in the Gulf for treatment. The group, which includes children, has been airlifted to Abu Dhabi after leaving Gaza via the Rafah crossing. Authorities in the United Arab Emirates have pledged to treat up to 1,000 wounded Palestinians, with more flights expected to follow in the coming days. Israel denies ordering the evacuation of the Al-Shifa hospital. Instead, it says it's assisting with a request from the authorities to facilitate voluntary evacuations from the facility to help deal with overcrowding. Correspondent Sam Mednick from the Associated Press is in Jerusalem.
On Saturday, Israel said that it was asked by health officials there to help evacuate people. Health officials in the Al-Shifa hospital said that they were told by the Israelis to get people to leave. What we do know is that on Saturday, health staff as well as patients and displaced people who were sheltering there have largely left. There are, however, about 120 critically injured people who have remained with a very skeletal health staff. There are also premature babies who are in the hospital. There are about 36 premature babies right now whose lives are hanging in the balance. They could die because there has not been fuel there for about a week. Now, Israel has said that it is going to pause some of its operations in order to let people evacuate, but it wasn't immediately clear where all of these people were supposed to go. 3/4 of Gaza's hospitals are no longer working. They've either been damaged in airstrikes or there's no fuel for them to function. Now, Israel is in its 4th day of this raid on the Al-Shifa hospital, but it's coming under increasing pressure to produce some sort of evidence that says that this is a Hamas command and control center. So far, it's shown what it says are images of weapons, including guns and grenades inside duffel bags, which were found in the hospital. It also said that it has found underground tunnels, but it hasn't shown anything indicative to say that this is a command center, which is both what Israel and the United States say that they allege Hamas is using it for.
Sam Mednick in Jerusalem. Thousands have joined a rally in Israel calling for more efforts to save the hostages being held by Hamas in Gaza. A Tanzanian national who was kidnapped in the attack on October the 7th is the latest person to be confirmed dead. The families of those being held are leading the march into Jerusalem, where they're demanding a meeting with Israel's war cabinet.
We gathered here from all across this nation to support the kidnapped families and to send a direct message to our government and every government that considers itself liberal and care about life. These hostages must be let free.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen is in Egypt for high-level diplomatic talks. She's expected to push for more aid into Gaza and protections for displaced Palestinians during meetings with Egyptian and Jordanian presidents. Our correspondent Yasser Hakim is in Al Arish on Egypt's border with Gaza.
According to statements from the Egyptian presidency, the main focus obviously was Gaza, and the statement said that the Egyptian president made it very clear to the EU chief that that Egypt wants a ceasefire in Gaza, and that it's calling on the EU to push Israel for a ceasefire. They want that Egypt rejects any displacement of Palestinians, whether in Gaza or outside or in Egypt or anywhere else, and that Palestinians should remain in Gaza and their homeland. He said that Israel should apply the UN resolutions concerning the UN General Assembly and the UN Security Council resolutions that last week that have called for an immediate ceasefire and humanitarian aid assistance to reach the Palestinians as soon as possible. So those were the statements from the Egyptian president. As for the EU chief, she left the meeting with the president and headed to Al Arish, where I am now, and she visited the airport where the EU aid and assistance had been arriving through air flights to the airport here. And as she said, there were 50 tons of European Union assistance to the Palestinians. She also made some statements saying that she thanked Egypt for its efforts to deliver aid to the Palestinians, also to help treat the wounded Palestinians coming in from Gaza. She also said that she agrees with Egypt on the need for a more humanitarian assistance to reach the Palestinians, and also for a non-escalation of violence in Gaza. especially against civilians, and the need for a ceasefire for humanitarian reasons. Also that Egypt and the EU are working together as partners in their efforts to try to put an end to the war in Gaza. And it's also said that it has been working to avoid any displacement of Palestinians. So those were the statements by the EU chief here in El Arish. She also went to visit the Rafah border crossing just a few kilometers from where I am. And she met with the EU diplomats, the European diplomats from different countries who are at the Rafah border for the day. They go there every day to receive the European European nationals and dual nationals who are arriving or being evacuated from the Gaza Strip through the Rafah border crossing. She met with them there. She met with the Red Crescent and all the aid teams and the trucks there carrying humanitarian aid to the Palestinians before ending her trip.
Yasser Hakim in Egypt. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, an Icelandic town is evacuated as experts warn that lava could burst through the ground at any moment. We'll be live in Iceland.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Welcome back. A reminder of our headlines. Asia-Pacific leaders call for a free, open and fair trading environment as they wrap up this year's APEC meetings. And an evacuation of staff and patients is underway at Gaza's biggest hospital as Israeli troops continue their hunt for Hamas fighters. Madrid is once again packed with protesters days after a socialist-led coalition took power in Spain. They're angry at a deal which was made with Catalan separatists, as our correspondent Ken Brown reports.
Hundreds of thousands on the streets of Madrid once more to protest against a newly formed government brought to power by a divisive law granting hundreds of Catalan separatists amnesty. Pedro Sánchez was sworn in for a new term on Friday as Prime Minister in front of King Felipe VI at the Royal Palace, promising to faithfully fulfill his obligations, swearing loyalty to King and Constitution. Sánchez won a vote in Congress on Thursday, ending almost 4 months of political deadlock. But to do that, he needed the support of Catalan separatists, which he only got by granting the amnesty. It's caused widespread fury, with one poll showing 70% of Spanish people against the deal.
This government can't last. The separatists have their boot on his neck and he can't do anything about it. We are at the mercy of people who hate Spain.
We have to keep taking the fight to the streets. We need to protest at our workplace. We should call for a general strike. We must do everything we can. Now is the time to act.
Sánchez has promised to unite the country and bring together regional factions for a new chapter in Spanish politics.
This is a legitimate, democratic, constitutional government whose power is limited by law and a temporary mandate. When our citizens vote, they are choosing the time, the government and the opposition democratically.
with Carles Puigdemont and other architects of the 2017 unilateral declaration of Catalan independence preparing to return from exile to Spain, tension remains high. The anger has spilled out onto the streets of Madrid, with nights of unrest around the Socialist Party headquarters in the centre of the city. Just days after its formation, people here say they will fight until this government falls. Ken Brown, CGTN, Madrid.
Iceland is preparing for a possible volcanic eruption after a sudden upsurge in seismic activity. The town of Grindavik, 50 kilometres south of the capital Reykjavik, has been evacuated. Meteorologists say they've identified a build-up of semi-molten lava under the town. They're warning that growing pressure could force the ground to rupture in the coming days. Our correspondent Johannes Plashberger is just outside of Grindavik for us now. Johannes, are we any clearer when or if this eruption might happen, and what other measures are being taken?
According to the authorities, the volcano is set to erupt any day now, which will take place behind me in the Fisher village of Grindavik, not far from the capital of Iceland. And this eruption is imminent according to the Icelandic Met Agency, because the seismic activity has slowed down recently. This is something we have seen before past eruptions, and this eruption is set to take place along this 15-kilometer crack which opened up in this Fisher village, and the lava which is flowing inside this crack has risen recently to 500 meters below the surface. However, this eruption is likely to be less dramatic than the last big one in 2011. The eruption is said to not be very explosive, and the airport, which is also close by, is said to not be affected that much. Air traffic should not be affected, according to the authorities. And currently, the government, the authorities are erecting walls out of earth, out of soil, with bulldozers around the power plant, which is next to Grindavik, and they're also evaluating whether to erect such walls to protect this town. But the Icelandic Prime Minister Katrín Jakobsdóttir told me earlier today that she thinks it's more likely that an eruption will happen. Let's listen to what she said.
Because it's a danger zone. You're not allowed to go there without being escorted by police and rescue squads. And as usual, we cannot possibly say where exactly an eruption will start, but we still consider it more likely than not that there will be an eruption.
So, Johannes, more likely than not, the Prime Minister told you. People there must be worried. I don't know what they've been telling you. What's going to happen to the 3,000 plus people who've been evacuated from that town behind you?
Yes, I've spoken to some of them this morning. They tried to enter this roadblock to get to the village to pick up some of their belongings. Dozens of these residents, they have been given every day about 5 minutes of time to collect personal belongings, and they're quite desperate, because I talked to a young man this morning, and his family has sheep. They take care of these animals, and they had to evacuate the sheep as well. He's very sad, because he grew up in this village, he lived all his life there, and now the village is destroyed by this huge crack, and it's said to be even more destroyed by the volcano. But most of these people, they have been provided with housing. Some of them got to stay with relatives, and the government has proposed a bill to ensure salary for the next 3 months to the people that used to work in this town.
OK, well, Johannes, many thanks indeed for that. Johannes Plashberger reporting from Grindavik in Iceland. A second attempt by Elon Musk's SpaceX to launch the biggest and most powerful rocket ever built has ended in another explosion. The 122-metre Starship is vital to Musk's ambition to send humans to Mars. It did take off successfully, but then things went a little off track. Its booster exploded after it detached, and then ground control lost data around 10 minutes in. SpaceX wasn't able to regain contact with the rocket, and so eventually triggered its self-destruct feature to stop it travelling off course. James Head is a professor of geological sciences at Brown University in the United States, and he participated in the selection of landing sites for the Apollo moon program. And he believes that, far from being a failure, the launch should be considered a success.
Rather than a setback, it seems like a major step forward. The problem with space exploration is that people think it's like, oh, yeah, it's like turning a switch, and it's just not like that at all. You have to do simulations, and you have to do practice and practice. Remember that less than 7 months ago, about 7 months ago, the first one failed for 4 fundamental reasons. It blew up the launch pad, the Raptors wouldn't work together, the launch escape system, the launch termination system was delayed and didn't fire, etc. All of those have been fixed in less than 7 months. I mean, imagine trying to get a room in your house remodeled in 7 months. Not going to happen. But they did it, and they did it beautifully, and the launch was beautiful. So now we turn attention to the next problems, which is once the separation of the big rocket happened, indeed, there were some issues there with the way the rockets fired to try to bring it back down to the surface to land and use again. And the launch termination system initiated, which is the right thing to happen. And then as the rocket continued on, it flew beautifully for a long period of time until it was lost contact, and the termination system was... So explosions are real, that's what's supposed to happen. So, you know, looking back to the Apollo days, we had 21 robotic missions before Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon. And the first 6 Ranger missions, we couldn't even hit the moon. We couldn't hit the moon, that big gold thing up there in the sky. So this is a normal kind of sequence of events. And, you know, it was a successful day for SpaceX. And now they'll move on, just like they did with the previous one, and solve their attention, you know, to these outstanding problems. So I'm excited. I was really emotionally very excited to see the success so far.
Oh, good. Well, it does put things into perspective for us that this is incredibly challenging work, and this is a step forward. It is progress, even though there has been delays and difficulties and setbacks. Just how challenging is it in the field of private space exploration? And do you think it's right that it's these billionaires who have all this money, who can maybe afford to have some element of failure, who are leading on space innovation rather than national governments?
Well, I think the private enterprise is playing a hugely important role. I think you have to step back and look at SpaceX as an entity. They are phenomenally successful. The CEO, Glenn Shotwell, is phenomenal. And, you know, they are doing, look at the Starlink communication systems. Look at all the launches to the space station. Look at all the resupply to the space station, sending astronauts, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they have been phenomenally successful. Not without failures at the beginning, just like we're seeing here with this big rocket, but nonetheless phenomenally successful. And I think that's really the way to go, because government tends to get a little, I would say, you know, ossified in a way, and they're set in their ways. And the innovation comes from private industry is fantastic. As for the money going to all the billionaires, that is a worrisome thing. And I think, you know, yeah, I don't tell people how to spend their money when they make it, but at the same time, I think, you know, they're also doing a lot of good. So I don't know where to come down on that one.
Professor James Head there. A final look at the headlines. Asia-Pacific leaders call for a free, open and fair trading environment as they wrap up this year's APEC meetings. An evacuation of staff and patients is underway at Gaza's biggest hospital as Israeli troops continue their hunt for Hamas fighters. And fury on the streets of Madrid. Tens of thousands turn out to oppose the coalition government's amnesty deal with Catalan separatists. And that is The World Today. Thanks for watching. There's more news at the top of the hour. For now, from all the team in London, goodbye.